All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome. Tom Hazard here with my partner, better half, Tracy Hazard of Feed Your Brand and Podetize. And we have a really good topic today for everyone. We're going to record this as an episode of our podcast. They're going to be talking
Just
about
like we always do.
just like we always do. Talking
Yeah.
about
So for those of you who are watching us on the live stream and you've never seen us before, we are showing you our process as well as recording our episode and coaching our clients all at the same time. And this is a great strategy if you're getting started on a podcast and you're thinking to yourself, I really don't have time to record, or how am I going to make time to record and do my day job? Well, this is how we fit it in to our week. And if we didn't do this, I can guarantee you I would have trouble getting Tom to ever sit down and record with me and keep a schedule.
I take issue with that.
No, it's true. That's why you take issue with it.
No. I like scheduling it for sure, but I would.
Right. You're better when you're on
anytime.
a schedule. That's just who you are. And that's your personality. That really works for you. Right. So, this is a strategy and this is how we use it. So we're going to reveal our process along the way. That's kind of what we do here. And we're also going to cover a great topic today, and then we'll do a Q&A at the end.
Okay. So you want to start or should I?
I'll start.
Just choose. I mean,
yeah,
yes
I'll start. I don't
okay,
usually start. So
yeah.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to Feed Your Brand. I'm Tracy Hazard, and along with my co-host and partner, Tom Hazard, we are going to cover copyrights today, and we're going to cover it in a slightly different way. We're talking about pretty much music copyrights, any video rights in case you have stock footage or anything like that, image rights. And we're going to talk about it in that broad sense. And are you putting together the best practices for your podcast to prove that you have a right to use your images, your music, your video clips, that you have a right to be able to use those? Because there are a lot of cease and desist letters going around because, lawyers need something to do, right? And so there's a whole entire firms and whole entire actually softwares right now that are trolling through all of this and sending cease and desist letters and other things like that. Or YouTube actually has a whole process by which if they don't see what they're looking for, it comes back and it alerts you and say, hey, you got to prove it. Do you have the rights to this music? Are you allowed to do this? Or we're going to take it off. And so takedown is a part of the whole industry. It's the DCMA. So you have that process that it can already happen where they can force takedown of your content. Now, it could go even deeper with liability. We've seen that with some clients before where they didn't have rights to images that belong to news media and other things. So that's what we want to talk about today, is really make sure that it's clear to you what your process should be. This is not about copywriting your own stuff. We'll deal with that in the future.
Yeah, no, this is really critical for podcasters. And let me just give you an example. Here's one example that we see happen a lot is a law firm who is trying to make money for themselves, usually more than for their client, although they'll say it's for their client. They'll do a reverse image search in Google, and their client has copyrighted images. Maybe they're on iStock Photo or Getty Images or some of these sites that people get images from. And they end up, seeing the image used on websites with no attribution to where they got it from. And that's pretty common. Not everybody would put attribution, but these law firms are going to reach out if there's one of these images on your website and say, hey, do you have a license for this image? And, please provide it to prove you do. Otherwise, they don't just, then one thing they might do is send you a cease and desist letter, but they're more interested in seeing how long you've had it on your website and making you pay a penalty for having used it without having purchased a proper license, without having the rights to do so. And many of us entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, small business owners may not even realize this is a thing, that this is something that you can actually get in trouble for and end up being stuck with a pretty big bill for, using a copyrighted image without permission, without a proper license. That's one example.
Well, and it's worse. I just want you to think about this. It's worse if you use that as your episode image because of the syndication implications of that, that it's syndicated out there. It's been on Apple, it's been on Spotify, it's been in all those places. They're going to make a bigger case out of that than they will your website, especially if you can prove you really hardly have any traffic to your website, or, like that's not, unless you had a big deal website with a lot of traffic on a monthly basis, they can't prove that it did anything for you. So that's less likely, although they will still come after you for that. It's less likely to mean as much as if you used it in an episode art situation or a cover art situation. A cover art is really worse because it's representative of your whole show and it's used everywhere for as long as your show has been live. And so that's something that you really do need to watch out for. So this is something that a lot of you who go to Fiverr, go to some of these other places to have your cover art created, you don't always know where they get images. And you don't always know if they have given you images with full rights, what they've done with it. And so you have trouble tracing back to them and getting to that person and saying, hey, where did we buy this stock image? I know you charged me for it, but I don't have any number. I don't have any license number. This is where it will fall apart if you do not do that from the beginning. And you may end up having to replace your cover art immediately.
So this is just one example, but the big important message here is if you don't know where your images or music or video clips, if you're using, stock video, came from, it's time to figure it out. There's no time too soon. You need to know where it came from.
You need to figure it out at the time that it's created, right? That's something that's critically important. So at the time that it's created. So when we create them for our clients, we have a record of all of that. Where did that image come from? It's usually stored with the image. It's in the metadata that's there. We know where that came from, what site it came from, what license it is. And if there was something wrong with it, we could go back and look at the account and double check and say, oh, there was a typo in it. Even though we gave attribution, we did something wrong. We can fix that, and that can be done as well. So that's the first thing. The second part of what I want to tap onto what Tom said here is that a lot of times you assume that your guest has a right to the image when they send it to you. Sometimes they don't even have a right to their own profile image and they don't know it. So if you're accepting images from your guests, make sure that it is in the metadata, make sure you've asked them. That's the source time point at which you want to ask them, hey, do you have a right to use these images?
And just to be clear, as Tracy was saying, our customers that we're doing production services for, when they provide us an image, say, hey, here's an image, I got it from my guest, please use it for the featured image for the podcast, use it in the blog post, or however they want us to use it. We really don't vet that for them. They're saying, here's an image, you can use it. That's fine, we'll use it. But if there's any copyright issue, that's on you, the customer. You provided the image, you're the source. We're not going to question you. We're understanding, great, you have the right to use this image, you provided it to us, so we'll go and use it. So just make sure you do. And for obviously headshots from a guest and things like that, if they're giving it to you, obviously you have their permission, they're giving it to you, right? But we've seen it happen where other images a guest provides end up having some significant copyright issues, even years later. And it can cost hundreds and even thousands. We've seen it cost thousands of dollars to pay a penalty when in fact the guest didn't have the right and it's on your website. They're coming after you, not the guest, because it's on your website. So not to overly alarm you about this or scare you off from using unique images for every episode and using them on your website related to the episode. If there's a blog or some sort of post for the episode, is an excellent thing to do. Also for social media, share graphics. You definitely should do that. All we're saying is make sure you actually have permission and have the rights to use the photo before you do, right?
So, Tom, let's talk a little bit about YouTube, because YouTube has gotten a little more sophisticated with how they do things and require and have fields for putting in what you would call attribution or license agreements or anything like that. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So on YouTube, obviously, some people are posting their podcasts on YouTube as an audiogram. Others actually are recording their podcast as video also, like we are, and putting them in their YouTube channel. And this applies to both of those situations, because most of you podcasters out there, and I think pretty much all of our podcasters, have a pre-recorded intro or outro for the show that has music. Now, we've had people come to us and, bring original music they had made for them. That's wonderful. It's kind of rare, but they do. Other people have been podcasting for years, and they provide us they had a pre-recorded intro and outro. So, we're not creating that. So hopefully they had the rights to that music. When we are launching a show, we have music sites that we pay for, that we have the rights to, choose and download music, and we have a license for that. This is very important.
There's like a code that you have an ability to put in. It's kind of, and if you think of it like an image, if you've ever bought an image off a stock image site, they have an attribution link usually, and that has all that information in it as well. In music, it has its own same model, but it's a number and a code.
And over the years, we've sort of evolved which music sites that we use for our customers and for the work we do on behalf of our clients. And there's lots of good ones. And I'm not saying one is necessarily better than another. I'm not, making a judgment on that. The one that we use, we get a license number, and it's called Content ID number. And in fact, on YouTube, so YouTube is better than a lot of places you would distribute your content on this particular issue, because when you upload a video to your YouTube channel, just like you would enter in the title of your video, the description of your video, put keyword tags associated with your video, all those things you do to configure a YouTube video for publication, there's another field called Content ID. And you put that number in there, and you're telling YouTube, hey, there's music in this. Or it might also, there's also stock video footage. With our customers, when we edit their video, we've also created a video intro, which has music in it, but also a lot of times has some stock video footage that we've purchased on behalf of our client from stock video website, so that intro is more visually dynamic. And you also have a license for that. So whatever purchased music or video clips that you might have, and if you're a do-it-yourselfer out there, you may be doing this on your own, you want to make sure you have that license. And in YouTube, you enter that Content ID, because then that's a part of the video. And in YouTube's system, it tells YouTube and the world, hey, I've done this properly. I have the rights for this, and no one's going to bother you.
Remember
They're gonna
that
see that
all of these systems use a bot, right? So the bot goes through it. So when they hear music that they know is already licensed, it already knows that. And then when it doesn't see that content ID, that code number in the space, that space is blank, they just assume you're not in compliance, and you get that notification, and it's all automated. There's no, there's no human until you get all the way up through the system. If you're fighting it because something's not right, it is just that systematized. So comply with the system. It's going to make everything smooth, everything easy. The number one thing that will happen to you first is your monetization will be turned off on your YouTube. That's the first thing that will happen, is you'll lose your monetization ability. Then you'll lose the access. They'll turn off access to the videos or to the channel, to all of those things. You can cascade up in problems from doing this if you don't comply, and then you don't reply when you do get a takedown.
And a similar thing can happen with your podcast episodes. It would be whoever the copyright holder is, if they believe you don't have the right to use the music that's in your podcast, then they'll reach out to the individual listening app and ask them to take your show down, because, you don't have the rights. Now, usually they'll reach out to you first and say, hey, prove you have the rights. Now, the podcast ecosystem does not have as good a proactive system as YouTube does for, asserting that, hey, this music I'm using in my pre-recorded intro, I do have the rights to it. So sometimes, you may get an email from a copyright owner or an agency or an attorney saying, hey, we see you're using this music. Do you have the rights to it? And, you should have the rights to it. We're advocates for that. We, don't think anybody should be using any music in a podcast they don't have true permission to use. And you want to, as you go on, especially if you're self-publishing your episodes, maybe editing your own audio, you want to keep records of every episode. And, if you use different music in different episodes, or at minimum, hey, your pre-recorded intro and outro, I'm using this music and here's my license. Keep it in a folder somewhere on your computer that you have it, or in the cloud somewhere where you can access that. So when anybody asks, you could just go and copy and paste. Yes, I purchased the license. Here's when I purchased it. Here's the information. And then they'll say, okay, thank you very much. And they'll leave you alone. They're not going to bother you again.
A lot of times the problem with that is that a producer made this for you, right? Somebody else made this for you. Someone on Fiverr, some contractor, freelancer made this for you, and you didn't get it at the time. That's more common the problem. And they know that. And that's how they, are generating more income for themselves, because then it'll be cheaper for you to pay another $50 to them to buy it again and be in compliance than it is for you to try to track it down and find it, and you won't be able to. Right. And because their choice is, and they could even try to extort more out of you, their choice is to tell you, you have to you have to take it all down, and then they're going to sue you. Right. Like that's their opportunity is to take down first. And that takes down your entire show, and you have to replace it all, and you have to do it all, which is yet another reason why we utilize that intro outro mixing. Because when we can do a custom intro outro, we can remove it and we put a brand new one in. So if there's ever a problem, we've got a solution for that. And it's one of the reasons we did that, was a quick and easy way for us to replace those intro outros if we ever had an issue, or if we ever needed to update them.
So for those of you that may be new to the podcast, or new to new to Podetize and what we do, I want to explain that a little further. What Tracy's talking about is using our platform to add your intro and outro on your show, and to not have it edited in, baked into one MP3 file that you upload and publish. Our system gives you the opportunity to do that differently. Upload that pre-recorded intro and outro, and our system adds it to the episode before it publishes. But what that leaves the flexibility for is easily retroactively replacing it with a new one without having to do all the hard work of re-editing and re-uploading every episode. So one of the advantages of hosting on Podetize.
While we're saying that, let's do that right now. So this episode will probably fall into, and I'm pretty sure it will, is the new updated intro outro that we've created, where we decided to get updated music. And so
did we decide, Tracy, that we're going to start with just the new episodes going forward to that, or are we replacing them on past episodes also? Because that's a choice.
That was the choice. And I don't know what choice we made, and we'll have to figure it out. But either way, you could hear the transition if we left it in. And if we didn't, we actually have the ability to switch them all out. And I think that our team is just flagging me right now in the chat, which is wonderful, telling me that we wanted to replace them on all episodes, because we wanted to do just this, show everybody how easy that is for us to be able to do that. So we are going to replace them on all episodes. So when you listen to this episode, you will hear the new intro outro that we've recorded with.
Actually, more to the point, you've already heard it.
You've already heard it. Yeah,
because you're episode, you heard the beginning already, right?
So listen to the end and you'll hear the outro. So yes, but we updated our music at that same time. Now, there's also a couple of other practices you might want to try here. And this is what I'm going to refer to and say. If you just want to make this really easy on yourself, and you don't want to forget, and you don't want to lose it, put it in your default episode call to action. And a lot of hosts have this. We definitely have it on the Podetize platform. But basically, you have a default sort of description that goes into every episode. And you can add in to the bottom of that a code that says, here's my license ID for the music, and give attribution to whoever the music is. We've had people do that for the image that they use was a photograph taken of them or something, and they give attribution to the famous photographer for their cover art image, and they put it right there in their episode description and in their show description. So you could do that in either way. So at least you have it set into your feed somewhere, so you'll never lose it then. So either use your show description or your episode description, or both. And, depending on what it is that you're using, you can do that way as well. Then it's there. The one issue we also have heard from musicians who have podcasts, and this is a little bit different. If your music is already being sold on Spotify and you use a segment of that music on your podcast, you are more likely to get nasty letters and messages from Spotify or from Apple, because they already have a system that is checking for duplicate music and music that is already licensed, because they want to make sure that you're paying Apple for it or paying Spotify for the access to that music. So when they hear that duplication of that music, they know it. And so we have had the musicians that I've worked with so far all put them both in their show description and in their episode description, making sure that everyone knows that I am that author of this. I am the songwriter. I am, the musician. And that way there's a tie to those two things. And I think there might even be an account number that sometimes they reference. So they might even go as far as that.
We definitely have some podcasts that are for musicians and interview musicians, and they're talking about their music and playing clips and things like that. And fortunately, musicians, probably more than any other type of individual who might be podcasting, are very well aware of copyright laws and rules, and they're usually on top of it.
Right, exactly. But it does work a little bit differently. And I'm going to say the bots in that system pick it up a lot more easily if you don't have your reference numbers and you don't have what you need. So you do have to be careful with that. So
I hope really any of you podcasters out there listening to this episode have not had to deal with this, because it's not fun. It takes time. Takes energy. You're sort of on the defensive when anybody asks you about it, to prove, because it is up to you to prove you have the rights to the music, the video clip, the image that you're using, whatever it is. And so all we're saying is stay on top of it and, be proactive. And if for some reason you're out of compliance, I'd start fixing it before someone discovers it.
Before someone notices. Yeah. If you know it, then go fix it right now. But I just want to recap a couple of best practices that I find the easiest way to do it. The easiest way to do it is whenever you buy a video clip, you buy a music clip, you buy a image of some kind, or you get it from somewhere that you contracted for it, immediately put the information in the metadata of the file. So you go get more info, and you can type it in manually if you need to, but put it in there from the beginning, because that's the easiest storage place for it. And you will always be able to access and find it. And 9 times out of 10, the bot that's searching for it will also look at that metadata and see the compliance there. Now, they may not be able to associate you having purchased it with that number, and that's something that it may ask you for proof on. So then the other side of that is to make sure that you keep, even if you no longer use that stock photo account or something, but keep your account open there to access the library at any time, even if you're not paying for new credits. Almost all of them allow you to go into some free mode on all of them, so that you can maintain the library of what you purchased. And so they should always be there. So keep access open to those things. You're going to need them at some point in the future. So those are a couple of best practices. And then again, like I said, if it's an ongoing thing, if it's something that goes throughout, like cover art images or episode art images or music, put it right there in the descriptions in your feed and save yourself some time and energy.
One other little tip that can help you, this is going to be unique to images. Okay. This won't work if you're taking a music and putting it into your intro, because that gets saved as its own file name and a part of every podcast that has a unique file name. But if you're using an image, And this would be more like in your blog as a reference image. If it's part of your cover art, again, you're going to alter it, use a portion of it and save it as something new. But if you're using an image just the way it is as a reference image, and you've purchased that image from one of these, image websites, iStock or, Shutterstock or Getty Images, any of those, there's a file name that they give that photo, save it, and don't change the file name. Because if you publish that on your website and that file name is the same, that, while not conclusive proof that you purchased the license, is pretty darn good. And they usually won't bother you because they'll see, oh, that's the same file name as what we put up on iStock. And
that's in their account too.
You couldn't have gotten that. It's very likely the only reason that image file name is the same is because you downloaded it from that platform and paid for it. If you didn't pay for it, it would have a watermark in it. It wouldn't be the same. But if it's the pure image, it has that file name. It's pretty good circumstantial evidence that you did the right thing, even if you haven't put the license in the metadata like Tracy suggested. So,
and it will be easier to find in the account later. So like if you have your account open, it's hard to figure it out.
But if you change that file name, then they, get a little more suspicious, right? And it's like, where'd you get this? And, now I want to know, I want to see the license. So the bots, I think, tend to leave you more alone if the file name's the same. That's all I'm suggesting.
That's such a good point. Now, I do want to say one last thing. Just because you're using an AI image generator or an AI music generator, those exist out there. Although I have to say, I think the music is really crappy, but that's my own personal viewpoint. And, but even though you're doing that, those are not copyrightable. That doesn't mean that you won't have a copyright infringement problem, because some of these images that are being created already infringe somebody else's copyright. So just be very cautious that you could still end up in a takedown situation over some of those AI images right now. They're not, you're not home free with them at this stage of the game yet, because how they're generated is still controversial. But AI
image generation is still a little bit of the Wild West right now, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's just that so many of them have learned off the Getty library. I mean, there's a big lawsuit going on between Getty and one of the image creator systems. And the problem with that is what they've done is you can actually see in the AI version of the image, you can see a warped Getty watermark. So they had to use that image as a basis for whatever they generated. And so that's where you could get into trouble from doing it. But the great news is that when they all work it out and you finally get into somebody who has the rights to use their library and all of those things are worked out one day, those are not copyrightable. So you can't infringe on somebody else by having a bot create, an AI create your images for you, for your image library, for your podcast, for your blog, for any of those things. They're not copyrightable by human because they're not created by humans. And so the copyright and trademark offices do not allow us to copyright or trademark anything that is not created by a human being. That's already the law. It's been the law for quite some time. It's not new. So in that particular case, we won't have as many copyright issues in the future. But if the library that's generating it or the system that's generating it is infringing, it still puts you at risk. So just be cautious there. Add that one last copyright alert in here.
Very useful, Tracy. I'm sure that many of our listeners will appreciate that.
Well, we will be back next time with another topic on Feed Your Brand here that is focused just for podcasters and videocasters who are trying to make more out of everything that they do. That is our absolute obsessive focus here. Tom and I eat, breathe, live everything podcasting and everything in this. And so we're always interested in what you are looking for answers for. And so please reach out to us. Let us know what you would like us to cover on a future episode. Reach out to us on anywhere on social media or go to the Podetize website and send us a message right through the website. We'd love to have you. And if you would like to check out all of our episodes, we have a fabulous Showcaster player right on the Podetize website for you to catch all of the episodes of Feed Your Brand and see what we've been doing for the last few years for all of our clients. And you can also go to the blog post for each of those episodes and access even more detailed information. Sometimes we have tutorials we add and master classes and deep dives into things that we just touch on here in our coaching calls that we are now turning out as podcasts as well. So thanks everyone for listening. We really appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Tracy. Very well said. We'll leave it there. Thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you next time. This has been Tom and Tracy Hazard on Feed Your Brand. Okay, so that's our episode. So any questions here on Zoom?
So before we head
Okay.
into questions, I want you to tell the story of what happened.
Yeah.
So
All
this is look, we have been doing this and saying this to you again and again and again. There is an extreme power in having the content that is created by your podcast on your website and easily searchable in Google. That is the true power of it. So here's what happened to us this week.
So people book calls on my calendar every day for, finding out about what we do or, asking about to find out if it's right for them. And people find us many different ways. The most common way that people find us is a referral. Somebody who is working with us now meets somebody or has a friend said, oh, you want to get into podcasting, or you're already a podcaster. Oh, you're looking for new support to produce your episodes. Here, let me introduce you to Tom, or introduce you to Podetize. That's how we meet most people. But more and more, what's happening is people are finding us either through social media posts or through Google searches. And so this happened this week. So on Monday, I had a call at 4:30. Somebody booked it earlier that day. And here, there's a very, very long note in the calendar booking. And so I have that as a reference. I'm going to read you some excerpts of it. But I met with this person and she shared more of the story. Well, so what she says is that I found you today from a business mentor when I told him I might want to break up with my podcast co-host. So he said, my business mentor and client, and I'm going to get more into what kind of client it is, because I think that's kind of a funny part of the story. I'll tell you in just a minute. Googled, my mentor and client Googled how to break up with a podcast co-host and found your episode with your wife. Thank you. It was helpful, and all sorts of stuff. And found the episode, and then she ended up binging a whole bunch of our episodes. But we had a specific episode we published recently about exactly that. What happens when you want to break up with your podcast co-host? So her business mentor. So by the way, so this now who is a customer of Podetize, because I had this call with her. She was a perfect fit for our services. She signed up for podcast hosting on Podetize and episode production the very next day, and is now a Podetize customer. So here we are, only like 2 days later, right? But she told me she does many things, but she is a massage therapist. And so she actually has this client she's giving a massage to, and he's like face down on the table and she's massaging his back and she's talking with him about her podcast. And he had his phone and I guess was able to look at his phone and had hands-free enough that he's typing how to break up. He's Googling how to break up with your podcast co-host, and boom, we show up right there. And the blog post for our episode, and he hands her the phone and says, here, I checked these guys out. And so that's how this person found us.
So I think we owe that guy a massage first off.
I think
like,
so.
Yeah, like that's the least we can do. But this is exactly what we want to happen for you. Like, this is why we do what we do here, is we want this exact thing to happen, because you're creating really valuable, useful content that is at the right time, at the right moment, with the right pieces of information. And somebody does what they do, which is Google for it. You show up. Because wouldn't it be a shame if because the only place we had it was a podcast and he didn't type it into the podcast app, he typed it into the main Google and we didn't show up? That would be a complete shame. And this is why we say video, audio, blog, and social share, because you don't know where someone's going to search for you and you want to be in all of those places.
And the other
that's
thing
the power of it.
It is incredible power. The other thing that I really want people, all of our clients and anybody listening this, all of our customers to take away from this and to think about is not just the power of blogging. Now, you know, I always tell every prospect, every podcast audit, I tell them, hey, if you leave your podcast as just an audio show in the listening apps or a video show on YouTube, you're only going to be found by people that are searching in their listening app and only for what's in your titles and descriptions. Now, fortunately, that title, How to Break Up with Your Podcast Co-Host, I think is in the title of that episode. So maybe they would have found us if they searched that way. But more importantly, where did that person search? On Google.
Because it's more common.
Blog posts are the currency on Google. Google wants to serve up a valuable blog post piece of content a lot more than they want to serve up a podcast on Apple, because Google doesn't really want to send people to Apple. They don't like Apple. They're not friends, but they will.
Oh, really?
Yeah, really. So, but a blog post on a website, that's what Google wants to send people first. So there's that. But think about what they searched on. You want to think carefully about what are the questions that your ideal listener, your ideal customer, your ideal prospect for being a customer might search on that you want your show to be found for. There've got to be hundreds of questions and different ways of asking those questions.
And different ways of saying it. Now, we just happen to say this in a much more vernacular way, like a more common term, like breaking up with your co-host, right? It could have been splitting up. It could have been like, you know, whatever it could have been. And I guarantee you we did say all of that within the episode. So it probably still would have shown up in Google search just because of how we do things. But this topic in particular is over 1.5 years old. It is not new.
It was that long ago we talked about it?
This is 2021.
Oh, wow.
End of 2021 or really early 2022. I'd be shocked if it was any later than that. Because it was in response to a client who had that problem and who was trying to sort this out. And I met with her and I gave her advice in person, and some of that stuff she didn't implement from the beginning. And she said, wow, it would have been really useful to know this when I was starting out. And we said, okay, I'm going to do an episode for you. So I did a full length episode. We did this as a choice in response to an actual specific need of someone in our community. That's a great way to go about doing it. Too often we give private advice and we don't go and share that publicly in that same model, in that same methodology, which is why we coach live here, because it makes it easy for us to do both at the same time and make sure that that information is getting out there. So not only was it over 1 year old, but it was exactly what someone was looking for and needed advice within our community, which meant that it likely would mean something to other people out there. And that's why the whole thing works together. And you've got to think that through. And it didn't come from my terminology. It came from her terminology. And that's also something we tapped into and did when we named that episode.
So the big thing I want everyone to understand is, you know, not everybody is who's listening, and maybe very few, honestly, of you listening, have a podcast about podcasting. I want to be really clear. That doesn't matter. It's not that we have a podcast about podcasting that worked. Our podcast is just an example of one, and that any topic that you talk about and you make a blog post for will help you be found by the right people who are interested to listen to your show. And if it has anything to do with what you do in business, they'll be interested to engage with you for that business like they did with us. So topics for future episodes, recommendation is, what are some of those questions that your ideal listener, prospect, customer might ask or Google that you have not yet done an episode on. Time to add those to your topic calendar and record episodes as soon as possible on those.
That's right. So we use our Feed Your Brand, this episodes that we create right here to coach all of our clients on the call here and give them some important information. And not always, it doesn't always apply to 100% of them. The episode on co-hosting applied to maybe not even 10% of our client base, I think, have co-hosts. It's not as common, but it was an important topic because people consider it, right? We've done probably our most popular blog and podcast is the best and worst microphones. Still to this day, it's the best and worst microphones. It's like our top page.
Okay,
it's
cool.
the top page. It's the top page on our entire website that anyone hits all the time.
Really? Oh,
yep,
interesting.
top number one page. So and it's, I don't know, 4 years old.
Easily. Because I really did. I remember doing that. We were in our previous location to where we are now. And I did audio and video unboxing videos on all of them. I really did a detailed review on like 8 or 10 different microphones, I think. Right. And
right. And so now
effort.
Knowing that now might be a good time to update it with the new model numbers. Right. So that's also something that you can always do. So even if you covered a topic before, you see the popularity of it, it might be time to do an update to it. We used to do that. I mean, when we did 650 episodes on 3D printing, there was a chance you had to cover something twice, right? Like you were just going to happen. So,
all right. So, hey, we've got a question from Ruth, who's on here with us on Zoom and in our webinar, and I want to answer it. And I know Melissa, who is one of our on our staff, answered, but there's a little more to this, Ruth, I want to share with you. So the question is, she had a question about changing the intro and outro with our system. And she says, is it possible to insert the intro a few seconds in? Like I start my podcast with a quick teaser, small, snappy excerpt, and small snappy excerpt that captures the episode, what we would call a hook line usually, or something like that, and then have the intro. Okay, so the way the intro and outro system works, it has to go at the very beginning and the outro is at the very end. Now there is a way to do it, though. There is a way to do it, but it requires a different level of subscription on Podetize. So what you're talking about doing, adding an intro, not at the very beginning, our system, the way that would work currently is to put it in like an ad, as if it were an ad or a promo. So it has to use our ad insertion system. Really, all it is inserting an MP3 file clip, which could be the pre-recorded intro of your show. So you'd need to upgrade to our monetized hosting to do that, but then you can upload your intro as an ad and add it 30 seconds in, 40 seconds in, 5 seconds in, it doesn't matter, in there. And then you can still replace it if you were to change your intro and outro at some point. You would change it in the intro outro system, but also in the ad system, you can replace the MP3 file and update it in an older episode.
So an easier way to look at this, Ruth, would be if you had your basic episode, okay? You had your basic episode and you wanted to, you can do 2 ads at the beginning. Think of it like that. You can add your teaser and then you can add the intro. So you basically do them before your episode ever airs. So you can do one and then the other. So now you've got 2 ads right before your whole entire episode. So now you have the ability to change them out. You still have the ability to remove that intro and replace it in the future. It's still free flowing and moving. It just happens through the ad system instead of the intro outro system.
Right.
So.
I mean, intro outros just by definition are usually at the beginning. We have had a couple use cases where people do what we call a hook line at the beginning, and it'd be nice if the intro and outro could go at a certain point, 30 seconds in. That is something that we're considering as a future improvement. Right now, we don't have the ability to do that with an intro and outro. We just use the ad system for that. It is a good suggestion, though, and I'm going to put that back on my priority list. I don't think it'd be too hard to do, but it requires a little coding change. So for what it's worth, there you go.
So we find though that hook lines are a lot of work for people. And
Well,
so it depends on whether you're really using a producer or doing it yourself. We find that those that do it themselves quit doing it quickly. Unfortunately. Yeah. I mean, look, I think it's really valuable if you pick the good hook line, you know what you're doing. You really know this. So this is where we really see someone who really is taking the time and looking for the right clip and really doing this themselves. They know what was said in the episode, or they have a really high level top producer who's really doing a very, very detailed content edit. And so those are the two kinds of people who use hook lines. We find that those that are doing live streams and just doing a different model just doesn't do it very often. And that's okay. There's like nothing wrong with it. I think it's great if you do it. So, but there's also nothing wrong with saying that's a lot of work and I really don't want to do that. That's okay too. So just want you all to understand the difference between those. We have done an episode on hook lines before.
yeah. I mean,
We probably ought to do one again. Like, I
it
think
probably, I mean,
yeah.
honestly,
Let's add that one to the list, Melissa.
Let's add that to the list. But the thing is, there's pros and cons to it.
Yeah, Ruth, it does. Like if you get it right, it makes you smile.
Makes you
right?
smile. One thing,
or it
though,
makes you excited to hear the episode, right? If you get it right. And too often it doesn't work like that. And that's the problem because people aren't doing it themselves, or the editor that they have doesn't have that production model where they understand your content deeply. And that's the problem. But you are doing it yourself, and kudos to you, because that means that you really know what your audience wants to hear. That's why it makes you and them smile.
I think it can be confusing to listeners at times, though, just as a sort of another consideration, because usually when people use a hook line, the clip that's chosen is of something a guest is saying. Okay. And your listener has never heard that guest before. They don't recognize that voice. So when they start playing the episode, the first thing they hear is someone else, not your voice. They don't recognize it. They're not hearing that pre-recorded intro that they recognize. And it can be confusing and make people think, did I press play on the right episode? Am I listening to the right show?
But if you do it consistently, if that's your model of it, then it works. You're right. I don't like it when a show does it randomly. Like it just doesn't, it's hard to understand. But if you do it regularly and they get it, then they
and I also think
that.
it's better when it's a shorter clip, not a very long one. The longer
some
people go way too long with it, and we're like,
okay, save that for the episode. We're doing another episode right here. So this is something I want you all, look, we just said this to all of you, like, picking your topics and the things that you might want to do. This is something that we're doing April's topics right now. In fact, we just had a meeting right before this where we're starting to brainstorm some of our topics. So we're actually going to go over copyrights and trademarks. I kind of alluded to that on our episode. We're going to go over copyright and trademarks from your perspective. Should you copyright? Should you trademark your cover art? Should you do these things? Like, these are questions that you might have. We're going to go over that in a future episode. It ties to this one, but it's not the same. And it would have distracted the episode if we went into that kind of level of information. It would have just been too much copyright information, and we wanted to keep it focused. But just now we said, I just typed into Melissa here in the chat, in the private chat, but she's keeping track of this for us. I said, choosing hook lines that really hook. Now that's just the inspiration starting point. Will really give it a really good title where it'll have something about podcasting into it. It'll have, I'm choosing podcast episode hook lines that really hook, or something like that. But we'll come up and we'll really SEO title it. But I gave her enough for us to put it on the list and then slot it into our schedule for April. So this is how we plan it out. When these things come up in your coaching calls, in your group, in any group session or any individual session, I have a system where we just type them down. We have a whole chat for it, and we just share it in the chat and we save them. And then once a month we review them and we decide which of these 4 are going to be April's episodes and which of these 4 will be May's episodes. And we just plan ahead like that. So you can do the same thing. So sharing our process.
Wonderful.
I'm
Okay.
not seeing any other questions.
I'm not either, and I'm not seeing anything on social, at least the channels that I'm monitoring.
Yep.
Although I have to admit, I'm not so sure I'm seeing it on LinkedIn. I'm seeing it on Facebook, but
It should be under your personal profile on LinkedIn because you went live, you restreamed live.
that's
so
what
it
I
should be
thought
under you.
too. That's what
Yeah.
I thought too.
I'm wondering if it's turned off. I got to check it. Let's see. Destinations. Oh, you were turned off. It's actually on me.
So you may need to check your LinkedIn quick to see.
Yep.
Or you mean, did
If
we
you
not
go to
go
LinkedIn.
live? Or
No,
it's
we did
only
go
on
live.
yours?
It only on me.
Okay.
It, for whatever reason, I was turned on. So for all of you who do this, if you have a co-host situation like we do, we use Restream, and we Restream out to LinkedIn, to Facebook, to Twitter, and to YouTube. And the issue is that Restream doesn't allow us to have both of us set on for LinkedIn. So Tom and I tend to trade off, but it looks like it was turned on for me and not for you this week, and which doesn't matter, but like we could have chosen either one of us. So when I get done today, I'll flip you off and turn on I'll turn you back on, and I'll turn myself off so that next week it'll go live into Tom's LinkedIn.
Okay.
So,
and I'm there and I don't see any comments. So I think we're good.
Yeah, great. Well, good. Well, it's been absolute pleasure getting to talk with all of you as always. And I love our coaching calls. It's one of my favorite times of the week.
Me too.
Because you and I get to podcast together, which we don't do enough of.
Yeah, I know. We each have separate
we need to
ones,
do more of
but
it.
this
I
one
know.
we do more together.
So
Cool. All right. Well, yeah, I don't see any other questions. So I guess we'll wrap it up. Thanks everyone, for those of you that participated and asked questions. Very much appreciate it. Those of you watching the recording, remember, if you're here live, you get to participate and ask some questions live, get some support.
But if you are watching this on the replay, tag us in the comments so that we can comment back to you, because Tom and I don't always see it unless you tag us. So make sure to do that. And if you have new topic ideas, drop them right there in the comments and social media, or drop a line to anyone on the Podetize team, and we'd be happy to add them to our list of topics that are upcoming. Next week, we have on our list of things for next week, we are going over short form podcasting. And so if you're thinking about having some shorter form episodes, if you're thinking about, really just doing TikTok, some of these micro trends, are they really working, is what we're going to explore next week. And we're going to look at some stats and some data of information we have, and where they're working and where they're not working. And if you want to go in for one of these micro trends, how to test it out.
Awesome.
So that's what we'll be covering next week.
Look forward to that. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Hope everybody has a great week. And until next time, it's been Tom and Tracy signing off.
Thanks, everyone.